hot mic.
This is the Brick Commentary Central. You're listening to the BCC podcast.
It is Monday, June 12th of 2023, and you're listening to episode 353 of the BCC podcast. I'm LQ. Joining me today is Maluris.
I think AI is the future.
Sure, Kevin. Also, Mace.
AI could be the future. I'm using it myself.
Yeah, we've talked about replacing hosts if they go missing with AI.
We have enough of a voice sample. We could.
I mean, there is more than enough of any of us on the internet to recreate an AI after we die.
True.
Except for Ford. You can never recreate Ford with AI.
I'm too unique for AI.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not unique.
Fast.
That's the tricky part, Ford. You're both.
All right, straddling the line.
You're equal
the
amounts.
Robots are never gonna take me.
You're equal amounts bland and unpredictable.
That's how I keep my enemies staggered.
And
Always
finally,
keep them
Leo.
Yes.
Oh, that was
Are you
something
okay?
else. Well, I burped right before this, and I was caught off guard.
guessing. Classic.
So what I was going to say is now lost to the wind.
Big oof.
So, it's that time of the year once again where we talk about Bionicle.
Man, we're old.
Also, wait, what is some of these pictures you guys are... I asked for pictures of Bionicle in chat, and half of them are, like, wrong.
Wrong? What could you possibly mean?
Well, Kevin has posted AI Bionicle images with appendages in all the wrong spots. Leo has, like, borderline content.
Hey, but mine are good.
I don't think I've gotten to yours. Okay, yours are fine.
I
I've
do
other-
like
I
that.
have
I
other
do
great
like that
stuff here.
one. I do like that one from Kevin. I feel like he wants to tell me to clean my room with that one.
The Jordan Peterson. I mean, you guys have all seen the Freedom Tunes episode with Jordan Peterson and Bionicle, haven't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, actually.
That's tonight's episode.
Ah,
Oh,
okay.
no.
Now, everybody, you gotta clean your room if you're gonna change the world.
Can someone make him say clean it all and that's be cleaned?
Clean it all. It must be cleaned.
See, the Bork, what happened when you don't clean your room? The Traga, they went all over this island, and they did not get the Toa to clean the rooms. And then what happens? Nature comes to correct its course.
Oh, you see, the Borak are a metaphor.
Well, the Toa Nuva, they had to collect the Nuva mask to truly clean the island of the masks.
Ford, your Jordan Peterson sounded like a Kadihi impression.
Yeah, that was a little more twist than I thought. I put a
Oh,
little too much
man.
nose into that one. Sorry, guys. I miss Bionicle Facts. That Twitter account. You know about
Yeah.
that one?
Yes.
Yeah, did you know?
Christian Faber is insane.
Well, he's an artist. He-
Oh man.
Did
Yeah,
you
there
ever
were
see the
some good ones.
Ninjago Facts one? That was good.
Yeah,
I think
Good.
Elke puts those a few times here.
Yeah.
that's
them all.
also kind of dead.
Yeah, it died a long time ago. Which is weird because Ninjago won't. It just refuses to.
Well, Ninjago has the advantage of being the cheaper employee.
True. True.
All right, well, we should probably refine what the Bionicle-based topic is today.
True.
And it is something I've actually thought about for a long time. Do you guys know Bionicle's not perfect?
What?
You
Really?
don't
Yes.
say.
And no, it's not for the reasons you think.
You mean it's not because of the fans that make us hate Bionicle?
Oh,
Listen to that podcast.
we're not the only ones ever to have done a podcast on that subject either. But yes, so I've got some random stock images of Bionicle up for this, and unfortunately, being out before the year 2010, there's no HD images, but it still looks pretty cool.
Some people are getting HD images.
I mean, there's this one guy who's been like upscaling the Bionicle trailers, and well, not Ben. This was actually a while ago, but still, that's
Yeah,
like
the
my
4K ones.
yeah. I think that's my favorite community project that's been done like ever.
Lord Findogask, I think his name is.
Okay.
He's
Yeah.
Italian.
Yes. Quite.
Mm.
Okay, anyway, so yes, Bionicle's not perfect, and we often have these discussions off air, because we do talk about Bionicle every few months or so still, even though
Every now
we've
and then.
shifted away from it being a primary topic of the channel, and especially the perpetually online portion of the community.
For people who don't know how to touch grass.
But it is
Mhm.
still nice to revisit something that was a very big part of our childhoods and was very good. Bionicle was still very good going back. Like, you forget about it if you're actually like just looking at what people talk about Bionicle. Bionicle was like had a lot of integrity in itself back in the day.
I always feel like, I can revisit Bionicle, which doesn't mean I always do this, but like anytime I do, it's always just like, yeah, I expect quality out of it and I get quality out of
Mhm.
it. So, did
Yeah,
it
at the end
age
of,
perfectly? Maybe not, but
At the
I didn't
middle-
age perfectly either, so it's okay.
Okay. At the middle of the end of last year, I finally tracked down all the novels,
Oh,
and
I've
now I
done
also have all the comics in either graphic novel form or in the pristine format of the actual book that came with the magazines.
Wow.
At this point, I think I've collected
I've-
basically all I want.
Yeah, I've got
I've-
everything that I want, basically.
I've done the same with the novels. I got the Escape from the Underworld book last week, so now I have all the chapter books.
Nice.
I
I don't
still
have the
need
G2
to-
chapter books in
I have all the graphic novels. At least I've got all the paper cuts.
Yeah.
that's
The comics are a different issue because the graphic novels are hard to get cheaply right now.
They are now. Well, all of the
And,
the Bionicle stuff did finally jump in value.
Yeah.
So I got in a good time, all right.
Yeah.
Good.
But I downloads of all the comics from
Yeah,
the Media
that's right.
Project.
I think it was graphic novel number 8 at the end of last year.
Which one's
And I
that?
told all,
That's
the one
the,
with all
the
the
3
exclusive
Bar
Barra
Magna
Magna
stories.
Okay, yeah, that's the exclusive one.
Yeah.
That was the last one I got.
Like all our sins, remember?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think I let you guys in on that deal.
You
'cause it
did,
was
yeah.
a steal.
I
Wait,
think
was it
it's
like
still.
$8?
I think it's gone up in price, but not by that much. It's still pretty decent.
It's a little
Last I
bit
looked.
cheaper than it used to be, actually.
Yeah, like for a
Oh, yeah.
while, I could only find it for maybe like 30, like $20-30.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's a bit.
It's better than Ninjago Dark Island number 3.
Oh, we're never gonna.
Well, yeah.
I
for a
swear
good
they
deal.
printed like 12 copies of that. No,
He's
it's,
never gonna know how it ends.
let me see. Do they even have any copies on Amazon anymore? It's $100. I think this is also like the last book Greg published for Lego. It was Ninjago
maybe.
Dark Island Trilogy Part 3.
Oh man. No, the last one was the instructions to the Bionicle
No,
King
book
Turtle
for it.
set.
Book.
That's a book.
Come on, Ford.
It's an instruction.
That's
booklet.
not a book,
Mm.
Ford.
Come on, Ford.
It's bound by staples.
Get
just
it
like the
together,
comics you wrote.
Ford.
I'm gonna stab you in the face, Ford.
Okay,
What?
maybe that was a bit much.
This is the kind of discourse we get from Bionicle fans nowadays.
Well, minus the logging off.
I'm not wrong. That's the sad part.
We haven't talked
You're not
about
wrong.
degeneracy yet, though.
Oh yeah. I got that from a Transformers discussion last week. That was
From what I hear, Transformers
was
is
enlightening.
just as bad or worse.
Yeah, from what I hear.
I'm hesitant to say worse.
You excited for Rise of the Beasts?
No.
Okay. Why does the one guy turn from a monkey into a monkey? Why did he turn from a bipedal, the 2-arm, 2-leg thing to a 2-arm, 2-leg thing? What does that transformation do for him? Why did he turn from a giant monkey into a slightly
We still
longer
haven't talked
legs
about
monkey?
what the subject is. Guys, we gotta
monkey
get.
from Transformers. Why would he ever go back to robot form when he can just stay a monkey?
Monkey.
Like,
Reject-
what is the point of
reject
that
robot.
transformation?
Become
What
Okay, he
monkey-
transforms in honor of Harambe.
Yes.
But then
He
wouldn't he
is-
stay in monkey form forever? Wouldn't
You
that
would
be
think so.
honorable?
But
You know,
you're missing
Mace.
something.
No,
He-
no. I got it. I got
Optimus
it.
Primal is the Christ figure of Transformers.
Oh, no,
He had
no,
to
that's-
make the bridge between monkey and human so that we can have that road open to us.
You know what's sad is if you watch Beast Machines, he is actually the Christ figure. He literally dies for their sins.
Doesn't make his transformation make more sense.
It's metaphorical.
It's metaphorical.
What the heck just happened? This wasn't even supposed to be a Bionicle theology episode. We gotta clean things up before we can get there. No more Transformers.
Okay.
No more. All
There's
right,
an
let's.
image there's an
Anyway.
image I saw somewhere of some fan gave Gary Chalk a Optimus Primal figure cut to a cardboard cross. He was not very pleased.
Didn't I just say we're getting off this? Oh boy.
Are there pictures of that out there?
I want to see if I can find it.
Yeah, find it.
Carry on.
Okay, so the subject of today, only a quarter way in the podcast already. Yes, so Bionicle is pretty cool. We all have fond memories of it. However, there are some things in Bionicle that could have been tweaked a bit just to make the story a bit better and more cohesive. So what we had for the subject today was we're all going to bring up a point where at least as many of us as have time to talk, and if we don't overlap points. Things that should have been changed in Bionicle or should have been different that wouldn't have affected the overall story, but would just have improved it overall. What do I mean by that? It has to be a change that doesn't affect where the story starts or ends or any of the major plot points. It also can't affect the sets. The sets have to be the same, so no characters can change. There can't be any major overhauls to anything there.
So, like, just to have an example, just to make sure we know what you're talking about. So this is like when the Inika as Matoran are traveling to Voyanui, you're just changing the way that they get there, essentially.
Essentially,
Because
yes,
you,
something
you
like
get to
that.
the
Something that
same,
wouldn't
get to the same
change, yeah.
conclusion, you get to the same story beat, but it's just like maybe instead of going to the Karzani, they, I don't know, they make it to the northern continent first or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Just making
So,
sure.
if we want, since I brought up the topic, I can give an example to start with.
All right, you start. Yeah.
Okay, one of the things that actually I think especially hurt the later years of Bionicle, probably my number one issue, which goes into more my broader point, but the lifespan of the Glatorian is idiotic.
Of the Glatorian, you said?
Yeah, the Glatorian. The Glatorian have lived, what, 100,000 years?
Oh yeah, it's stupid.
And Gresh was there during the Core War. Gresh, who was a rookie Glatorian. Honestly, I think it's probably the biggest screw up in all of Bionicle because it just breaks your suspension of disbelief.
Well, you see, I figured out why they did that, actually.
Why is that, Mace?
Well, you see, they were required to use the toys that were made, and Greg wanted to talk about the past of the universe, which was 100,000 years ago.
But we don't have any named characters during the Core. We don't have like stories that take place then, do we? They only reference
we
it.
do. We have
Just
Vastus with a whole little adventure during that time. Of course, they
was
was stuck with
that was a
just him,
fan
but-
story, yeah.
Yeah,
Isn't it? Decadence?
I think so.
Like that's the
So,
only
I mean,
story in it.
it is a good guess, Mace, but I don't think that's what happened. And now, here's the thing: is they could have had some Glatorian that are super old, but we know also Glatorian are like biological beings who have children, yet there are no child Glatorian or Gory anywhere. Like,
Little known fact, the Core War rendered everyone infertile.
I mean, basically.
Yeah, so that's the thing. Like the only official story, not counting the fan written stories about the Core War, it's the only one is All Our Sins Remembered.
Yep.
And that one's
and it
primarily
uses
about
new
Ron.
characters too.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, it uses new designs of the Elemental Lords.
Well, there's the Element
It
Lords.
just makes no
who,
sense.
well, they're not necessarily introduced in that story because it was written after.
They're not,
the
but they're
one that
non-set
did.
characters
But they are non-set characters, and they were referred to.
who honestly
previously.
have some of the worst designs.
Yeah.
For those who I want to just put the whole picture, so let's put it up over the other one. But for those who never saw this, like,
Well, they were gonna be the sets. They were gonna be sets.
no, I don't believe that because these actually just literally can't be sets.
Look at
They
that.
would have looked completely different. Because
Look at
remember
that
also,
pog face it's making.
yeah, I don't deny that the Element Lords could have been sets, but it wouldn't be these designs.
No, it wouldn't. No, it wouldn't. It couldn't.
You've got like Boss Nass there.
He literally do. Yeah. And Mysterio makes an appearance.
Literally just a fire. Yeah, Water Mysterio. I didn't even notice that one back there is an ice elemental.
You can barely see him.
And then, what is this one on here? Wait, the Earth Elemental Lord is that's when the candidacy is debated, right?
I don't know.
Leo, we looked this
Like,
up a few
bottom
years
one
ago.
is the rock one, right? He looks like the
Yeah, the sand and rock here. Sand and rock.
okay. The rock is the bottom one. The one in the bottom left.
Can you smell what he's
Is-
cooking?
Yeah, because he looks like the Beyond Nuggets dude.
Oh no.
No, no.
Oh no!
Like the
He does.
and then the one above him is like the one that's pointing.
Oh man, I need an edit of that.
It's like energized protodermis. Ah.
But yeah, so I don't think those are ever going to be the set. So obviously, there is no real reason for every single Glatorian to have been alive since the Core War. Which I got to bring up the Bionicle timeline again. Which is just, this kind of goes into... I won't bring up my other point because someone else might have even had that and I want to give them... Wasn't there like a graphic of the timeline at some point?
I don't think.
I don't remember an official one.
But was it 100,000 years that Matanui was gone?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so... yeah, and the idea Gresh is a rookie now acting like a teenager and he's over 100,000 years old.
I hated that.
Mhm.
And again, it would have been such a simple thing to not do, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, you literally don't have to have them around, and the story plays out exactly the same, because them being that old and being around back then never comes up. Like, as far as, like, the story.
Add nothing to the story and nothing to the characters as well.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this can go into the Matoran's lifespan are too long as well. I'm fine with them being, like, basically immortal. But there are certain points then it doesn't make sense for the way that they're personified.
Like
You know?
Takua
Yeah.
being
Well,
the
it makes a little
oldest
bit more
person
sense
ever.
because he kept having his memory wiped.
That's true. That's true. Sometimes on purpose.
Which, you know, for a Matoran, that's basically them being dead. Because they're
Yeah.
just AI, you know? So having their memory wiped is basically killing them. Makuta just did a genocide.
Not the first or last.
But yeah.
He did orchestrate the Archives massacre.
So no one's
Civil
going to try
War.
and argue that the Glatorian lifespan was a good choice.
No, yeah, I agree.
Who
It
We all
was,
agree.
it was
I
an
don't
awful
even
thing.
Greg
Thing
would
is, like-
argue that.
I don't think Greg has
Yeah.
argued. Has Greg said that the Glatorian lifespans are too long?
I don't know about that.
I don't think so, because that's a very Greg thing. Greg is very anti-death,
True. True.
which usually it's a good thing. But when writing fiction, it can get messy.
Well, he's
feel like-
anti-natural death. He's okay with characters getting killed.
My thing with the whole Glatorian thing is that, like, they can reproduce and they're, like, semi-organic, and yet they had the need to be, like,
Naturally, they're
yeah,
fully organic. They're just cyborgs.
but they had the need to be hundreds of thousands of years old for some reason, and it's like, okay, yeah, you could have younger characters, just have them be, like, 20. Jeez, just...
Yeah, some of
And
them
they-
could
that-
live,
that's-
some of them could not.
Yeah, that's the weird part about it, is like, why then have the decision to them being more like, you know, human figures at that point that have families and genealogy and stuff if the genealogy never comes up in the story.
Yeah.
Theo's posting things that are borderline.
I don't even know that I want to put that in the podcast, Leo.
Look how unhappy it made Gary Chalk.
Okay, well, I guess
Oh,
I have to
man.
put it now because you guys are referencing it.
yeah.
I don't know who this guy is.
That's
Some
Gary
guy's
Chalk,
holding some
That's
guy.
that's
the
Gary Chalk.
voice
He was
actor of the monkey.
Yeah, he was the voice
Holding
of
the
Optimus
monkey.
Primal.
He's holding the monkey.
Monkey.
Okay, back to Bionicle. But yeah, the Matoran lifespan, at least you can argue for them, but the Glatorian, there's no reason. Also, Glatorian and Agori are separate species. Why?
It's man-led erasure, straight up. There's no
It
such
could
thing
still
as
be
a
the same
short
they-
Glatorian.
There could, you know, why is our Glatorian not just more highly augmented Agori?
Or, you know, Agori are just children, and then, you know, after thousands of years, they can grow up to be a Glatorian someday.
But
That would
even
have
worse.
been interesting, actually.
Maybe.
It seems like almost they wanted to avoid the relation of like Toa and Matoran. They tried so hard to make them distinct from the Matoran race.
Actually, there is something
But
about what
they-
Mace was saying. Now that I think about it, in the first Glatorian comic that debuted, it starts off
Oh,
with
yeah.
Barracks and he's running.
Barracks wants to be in the arena.
Yeah, and Barracks is like, "Oh, maybe I can use this shield or something in the arena someday."
Well, Agori do
Implying
fight
that
in the
he's, like,
arena.
younger. Yeah. Well, you get that later, but when this is your introduction to the world, to this new setting and these new characters and the way they work, you get the sense that okay, so the Agori can eventually become Glatorian and fight in the arena and all that. But then again, after that,
I don't think-
you learn that Barracks doesn't even want to be in the arena, and all he wants to do is steal stuff.
There's a lot of a lot of change in how the characterizations were
Yeah,
between what Greg had started to do and what the script
what
of
ended up
Legend Reborn
happening.
did.
But
Yeah.
Greg wrote the script, didn't he?
Yes, but I don't think he was necessarily happy with it.
And he
Because
might have not been the sole writer.
his
to-
Gresh is not the Gresh that you see in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Like,
True,
that's a
that is
different
very
Gresh between
true.
comics.
his Gresh is kind of
Grim.
kind of sneaky. Yeah, like,
Not at
he's a
all.
little cutthroat.
You know, for all the years
Okay.
Greg answered questions, he never gave a lot of insight into behind the scenes stuff. If you know,
Probably because it made him sad.
well, also probably
Bionicle
NDAs.
just
Did
made
anybody
him
ever ask
sad.
him?
I want to say
No.
you probably have every so often. But if he's
I-
out now, maybe this is the time to pester him with such questions.
He's probably under NDA still. In like 3
Right.
years, it probably is the time to ask him. He's not on the
Yeah.
TTV message boards anymore.
He isn't? Thought he
I don't
still
think
was.
so.
I mean, he's last I heard, he was still
Is
posting
that
a
still
story.
going?
He
He's
might
st-
not be allowed to.
He ought to be.
Yeah,
He's still-
he should be
We
allowed to.
got a new NDA signed just to, write that little snippet for the Toatahu gift with purchase. So now we'll never be able to know.
All right, but yeah.
They still the Ask Greg subsection here.
All right, but so that's my thing. The Glatorians' lives are too long, and I feel like the whole Glatorian era and like Bara Magna as a whole would have been made a lot more interesting if the characters had normal lifespans.
Yeah, it's also would be an interesting juxtaposition against the Matoran who have highly augmented lifespans compared to
Mhm.
them.
And it's not like you can't have old Glatorian either. You can have people who, like the ones that win a lot, continue to get more augments, can afford more, and live longer.
But maybe not 100,000 years longer.
Yeah. No one from maybe like one person. Like that one guy with the wolves. He should have been like the only person alive during the Core War. And that's
You
kind
mean
of how the
Alan?
story. No. The other guy from
He's like Lyle or something like that.
he's not a set.
Yeah.
He's got like the metallic wolf creatures and Riddle of the Great Beings.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I forgot about him.
So yeah, so he is the only one that acts like he remembers it, even though he's just as old as everyone else. Doesn't make any
And then
sense.
there was Sir Tavis, and he actually died.
I don't
And they
remember
just say
Sir
it was-
Tavis.
Yeah, so he
That's
was
right.
like this old Glatorian that like basically invented the sport, the system essentially,
Like
and
the Gaiden Shinji of
pretty much
Oblivion.
Pretty much. And they say that he died of old age or whatever. It's like they could still die of old age, but just how long does that take? How old is old for a Glatorian? That
I
lives
almost
over
wonder if there
1,000,
was some
100,000
mandate from
years?
someone weird that said, "Oh, Glatorian can't have to live forever." It still wouldn't make
Probably.
sense. Sometimes Greg made weird decisions. Sometimes he just did. He's a good writer, but he made weird decisions.
Because, like, if that's the case, also keep in mind, there's so many characters on that world that would already know what the Mask of Life is.
Mm-hmm. Well, not
Mask of
necessarily.
Life?
Like, even the characters that we, know from The Legend Reborn, they would probably know what the Mask of Life is just by looking at it.
No, they wouldn't.
Life.
I don't think not the Mask of Life, because that
Yeah,
was like
no.
exclusively that was created basically inside the Motonui robot.
Well, I think it was created outside and then it was put
Yeah, it was
inside.
created outside as the key, essentially.
They still wouldn't know what it is. I doubt the Great Beings are just going
But
around
they
telling
would have
everyone
at least
about it.
Seen it, wouldn't they? So they
No,
would
I
know
d-
that
I
it
don't
was
think
so.
being-
Ford,
I
have
also
you?
feel
not
like the Great
know?
Beings didn't really involve themselves much with the Glatorian because, again,
They were
mostly
scientists,
they're-
not rulers.
their dealings
I
was with
mean-
the elemental lords, if anyone, and no one even seems to remember the elemental lords.
For I
So-
know. Have you seen the Declaration of Independence, Ford?
I mean, I've read it.
Have you
But have-
actually
Have you
seen
tried
it?
to steal it before?
Remember, there are no pictures in this universe.
True. Wait, no, the schematic.
That's not
Is
a
the-
picture.
Is the blueprint of the Great Spirit Robot not a picture?
Not in the sense of a photograph like I was talking about.
Okay, that's what you mean. I don't know. I feel like they might have some familiarity with some of the Matorian universe technology.
I
They didn't
would-
even know about the
on that
Ford.
world,
They didn't
but-
know about the planet-sized robot.
But if they didn't know, then that's fine. Okay.
I would very much put it past them to not be aware of any of the
All right.
Mator and stuff before
Okay.
Okay,
the.
let's someone else go with one of their points then. Leo, you probably have something.
Okay, well, this is somewhat along the same line as the Glatorian Age, but I think in general the time spans between events in Bionicle is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, that was another on my list.
Uh,
Not just ridiculous though, disproportionate.
Disproportionate?
Yes, sorry. But you know what I mean? Because it's like some of them are way too short, and others are way too long.
Such the fact that the entire canon story we follow takes place in a year.
But then the rest of the story takes place over thousands of years. Right.
Yeah, it's again something where it doesn't really matter to the overall story if it was changed at all. But it makes the characters feel less like characters because then they don't actually, like, for so much of their life they didn't have experiences, and then history feels weird. Like, the Matoran don't remember their own civil war. Not on Metro Nui, at least. Like, after in Manui, that makes sense, but...
Yeah, but then all the cool stuff happens in like a week. Like it's Solo or something.
Yeah. Also, like, they spend way too little time on Mata Nui then for it being the central location. The Toa should have been there for, like, at least 3 years.
Like how we spent there 3 years.
Yeah, I think that would have made perfect sense, you know? A year for the first plot, a year for the second. Ninjago takes place over a longer period of time than Bionicle does.
Yep.
The main story.
It takes so long
Yeah.
for that show to go. Characters die. Just waiting for things to happen. Like Dr. Julian.
Well, he did already die once.
Yeah, I know.
You know,
Like they resurrect.
Shadows
him,
died
really
twice.
dies.
So.
He was probably like 130.
Yeah. And then, of
But-
course, all the other elemental masters that, died.
Leo, do you happen to have like a recap of the Bionicle timeline?
Not on me.
I
but
swear there used to be one on BSO1, but I can't find
Hold
it
on,
now.
let me consult Bionicle Worlds real quick. I'll be right back.
Hidden World? I have one.
I forgot. Bionicle Worlds. Was that the one I was looking at the other day that actually like puts things together in a timeline?
Let's see.
Maybe.
They had the Game Boy game and an emulator on there, remember? And I started playing it.
Nice.
Wasn't that just?
Okay, so the entry
Oh
for
yeah,
Metro
yeah.
Has-
Ford told us about that.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was about to read it off. It begins 100,000 years ago, where Metro Nui is founded by the Great Beings. Then 87,000 years, Metro Nui forges trade pact with the League of Six Kingdoms. That is 23,000 years that pass before the next historic moment occurs.
Do you think Greg failed math?
I think he was just told make it sound ancient. Like, so, all right. So, for us, 2,000 years ago was, Jesus walking around. We had like near the height of the Roman Empire. We're about, I think, 100 years away from that. 2,000 years ago. You go back another 1,000 years. Rome wasn't even founded. You still have like. There are no Seleucid successor states, so you're just plumbing ancient history even further. Like 4,000 years ago is getting like Bronze Age collapse civilization. 6,000 years ago gets to the very first formations of human society. Like, I don't know, did the Matoran just have a different perspective than humans do?
They live forever, I guess, so they just don't care. They're
See, Leo-
stupid lazy, maybe.
They
Like,
could.
Not even the Silmarillion scales this way.
No, not even.
And elves can live forever unless they're killed.
But yeah, and Leo, you say they have perception. That could be a thing if the entire story didn't then take place over just a year.
Yeah. Because
like,
Well, the
you
story
on one
didn't
hand,
happen because of Matoran.
yeah, on one hand, the Matoran are like they treat them like Ents or something. On the other hand, they just do things and invent things rapidly.
because it has 7,000 years pass after. So that's 7,000 years of hegemony by the League of Six Kingdoms before Makuta comes and squashes them.
See, like 7,000 years something I could be okay-ish with.
But that'd be for like the entire timeline.
Now, Leo, remind me, how long were they on Mata Nui for?
1,000 years.
That's too long.
Thousand
Because
darkness.
how long were they on Mata Nui? They didn't develop anything. Then, like 3 months, they built up the civilization suddenly.
Well, oh,
Canonically, they'll say it's because the Rahi were attacking, but also, if you look at the story, the Rahi didn't start attacking quite as much until just before the Toa came.
like they would like the only thing the Rahi were there to do was keep the Matoran isolated in their 6 different settlements.
Mm-hmm. Also, then remember, like in the Mata Nui Online game, which yes is technically semi-canon, but we're going to treat it as mostly canon for the sake of this. They just
Like,
finished the Tunnel
this
to
point-
Likoro after 10,000 years.
Yeah.
I feel like at this point,
only 1,000
most
years, not
people just
10,000.
treat that as entirely canon, for the most part. Other
What would
than
you
one or two
guys-
things.
Yeah, I mean, there's more or less some parts of it, yeah. What do you guys say an actual good period, the time between, like, the Great Migration and the Toa's arrival should have been?
100 years.
I agree. 4 disagrees, I can tell.
Wait, sorry. So wait, the Great Migration. So them
So,
the Toa
the-
Metru moving the Matoran out of Metru Nui.
Yeah.
So like all the Toa Metru's
So
adventures that happened over
the
100
events
years.
of 2005 to the events of 2001, that should have been only a 100-year period.
I'm okay with that. I like that because that's another problem that I had was that the Toa Metru don't feel like they did much, even though
Yeah.
they did like a whole lot of stuff to set up the
Like,
Matoran on
they-
the way.
They spend a month as Toa and then 1,000 years as Turaga.
Yeah.
So that's another thing, but let's get to that
They
in just a
barely
moment here,
do
because
it.
that's
And I
actually,
get, like,
that's a
their-
much
their
more
destiny is
complicated
very-
fix.
Yeah, like their destiny is very quick to
Mhm.
to achieve and very easy to achieve because everything is just kind of there for them. They don't have to
Yeah.
do a lot of work to get it done, but it still feels kind of like really. That's it.
Ford, I completely agree with your point, but let's save that because that's another
Yeah.
whole discussion.
Yeah.
So yeah, as far as like, let's go and like finish tweaking the timeline overall here. Because the Metru, that's complicated. Because then we gotta actually try and do that without changing the story. But for the overall, what would you guys think? Like for the entire the shattering to Mata Nui, reforging Solus Magna
Well,
or
that becomes
Magna.
that becomes a bit trickier because the Manu robot is supposed to be a spaceship, and that makes time very, very funky. So I
Yeah,
could
okay,
definitely
let's-
see,
let's
like,
t-
10,000 years passing.
Let's,
But not 100,000.
for the sake of the conversation, let's not take relative time into account.
Dang it! That would hinge upon my time. Like, maybe you only experience 1,000 years passing for the inhabitants of the Manu robot, but like it's 10,000 years around Solus Magna.
So, I mean, yeah, that can be a whole other discussion, but I'm just the sake of, like, as far as the narrative goes, what would have been a better time for the Mata Nui robot to have been around in terms of years? I have my ideas, but let's say Mace, let's have you chime in on this one.
This might be controversial, but I kind of like it being gone for a long time. Enough time to feel
I
like
agree.
the
It can
players
still
are
be a
going
long
to
time, but
follow.
100,000 years?
Yeah,
10,000.
10,000 isn't enough. 10,000 is what we have recorded as humans. I think a little bit longer is kind of nice.
Like, it would have been helpful if we had some idea as to how the GSR got around. Like, I know the Red Star is supposed to be this rocket pack, so it can like float about the universe, but something that massive takes a lot of power. All right,
Yeah, but Bionicle's always had strange.
that's going to
power
flow.
things
That's
like
going to flow more into
and
one of my other points I
shell.
brought up.
Okay.
But like, its travel time should have an effect as to how much time goes on between the shattering and its return to reclaim the world. Because its whole directive by the Great Beings was to go out and catalog how other civilizations lived, so that it could then take this information, give it to the people of Sirius Magna, so they wouldn't have this breakout again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because when I think about it, I think the most appropriate. I think about it in the human sense, right? I think the most appropriate amount of time to me that it would take for the whole run of the universe for this robot. If I were to think of it in a human sense, would be as long as human civilization has been a thing. So I think like as early as like Mesopotamia or something like that. Just to give
Okay.
a sense of time and scale. Because then that would give the robot enough time to maybe circle back around on a few planets and see how the civilization is
So I
progressing.
want to hear
Okay,
Mike.
correct me if I'm wrong though. Like we're talking about like yeah, this is kind of the allotted time that was given to do its task, but if I don't remember correctly, I thought Montanui was kind of neglectful in his own time frame, like he was almost
He-
lazy in fact.
He was neglectful of the people inside of him. He wasn't,
Which is also
necessarily neglectful
contradictory
of
to
his
other
mission.
parts of the story.
Yeah, the whole time he was outside just kind of cataloging his planets and, getting a sense of where he was. But he didn't really care about all the other stuff going on.
Presumably, he would have done the whole Montanui camouflage thing on a bunch of other worlds, so he could just sit there and let his sensors like do their things. Like I assume he had a bunch of other probes he could send out.
So, okay, that is actually convincing me that point. If the camouflage thing was supposed to be for, like, surveying other worlds, then he would need a lot more time.
Mhm.
So, as functionally, I can agree with that. Narratively is where I start to have the problem with it, because if you do have anyone that remembers the core world war, the longer you go, the less sense that makes.
Yeah.
So, when trying to keep the story and, not change any of those beats, I would say 1,000 to 5,000, 10,000 at max.
I would
think
lean more
10,000
towards
is
10 and 20,000.
Yeah.
I mean, that's still better than 100,000. I'd be more willing
Well,
to do
yeah.
that than 100,000.
Like I said, like Mesopotamia, that was what, like 5,000 years ago? Something like
Like
that.
that'd be like the first
Yeah, like the first
fertile
major
crescent
human civilization.
civilizations.
Like that's
So,
how I kind of
like,
define
yeah.
it in my head.
Harappa and Mohenjo-daro.
That
It's
would've been
just
around,
like
4,000 or 5,000 years ago.
Yeah, the issue when you go to that length is the idea that the Victorian would even still be around, because civilization evolves in that amount of time.
Mhm.
And the tradition of
Not
Victorian
if you have the same people living the entire time.
Well, yeah, we already talked about that's an issue. So if you want to logically like have some of the things like the Victorian tradition still exist, I think you got to take it down to, knock it down to a few less digits.
That is reasonable.
So I would say 5,000, 10 or 20 even, I could
Yeah.
agree more so.
So
Yeah, a lot
I'd
of
say at least 10.
a lot of these nitpicks also like aren't even really about the story itself, like we
Well,
brought up. It's about like you read the narrative and then you look at the dates and think, wait a minute, this was how long?
Yeah,
This
like I
lasted
said,
for what?
this isn't, that's one of the qualifiers here. We're not trying to change the story, just make like the things surrounding the story actually serve it better.
So like
But-
Mesopotamia was like started around like 10,000 BC. If we're talking like as far back as that.
That's a bit.
That would-
I think that's a bit liberal with that.
Yeah, like somewhere between like 10,000 and like 3,200 BC. So even then you still got like 5,000 years on it at best.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how I think about it.
So if we
Like,
want to like
as
take,
long as there's civilization to record, it will do its mission recording it.
I'm trying to kind of look back on, because I'm thinking like estimated for like when the flood of Genesis would have been. I would say that would actually be like a good comparison to like how long the timeline should stretch
Yeah.
out, because that was a cataclysmic event for the planet.
Long
Well-
cataclysm to the next.
Are
Yeah.
you talking like the Cambrian explosion period, or like the genesis of life, or Genesis is?
He's talking about Genesis is in the Bible.
Yeah.
Making sure we're on the same
Take your
page.
geology timeline.
Noah's
and
Ark
throw it
Ford.
away.
Look, there's
Yeah.
a lot of different ways.
So that would have been
This is
Ah.
a Sunday school
There's-
lesson for.
There's
This
a
is
lot of
not-
different ways that an
is not
evolutionary
first-year
biologist can
geology.
think about Genesis and that word, especially when he's also going to Catholic Mass every Sunday.
I mean, it doesn't bring you any notions of Star Trek. No
Look,
planet
man.
Genesis.
Look, man.
so. Unfortunately, like my creationist timeline isn't like is at the top of my head as it should be, But I know, and also like ages and stuff, it's very difficult to calculate exactly. But the flood would have been based somewhere between 5 to 3,000 BC.
Good grief! I don't actually remember how long the.
Also,
first...
we're gonna have to do multiple episodes for this topic because we're not gonna have time for everyone's points.
Apparently, so let me just go to Tolkien Gateway.
Yes.
I don't remember
the
Tolkienologist. I remember what happens that marks these beginnings. I don't remember the times between them.
I do too.
Tolkien Gateway. Okay. Let's look up timeline. Okay. Calculate this. Okay, so they have a they break this up in days before days, years of the trees.
Can we just
And
go by
then
the
the
normal?
first- Okay.
I'm thinking of like YouTube. I get a lot of Tolkien lore from YouTube channels. Honestly, like Men of the West,
Okay, so the
and
first
they break
age,
it much easier.
he is a good one. First age is about 590 years.
hmm
That's a lot shorter than I thought it was.
The first age is shorter than you'd think because,
Yeah.
well, also the first part of the first age is kind of when time's still being established. So
Okay, the second age has a healthier 3,441 years.
okay.
And so that's even with like all the elves and
hmm
stuff existing. And the third age was roughly approximately the same length. It was about 400 years shorter, but still.
Okay. I believe most of them were 3,000 to 5,000 years.
Yeah, those are still healthy timescales compared
Mhm.
to like our own history.
So even if we're going by high fantasy standards, then I think 10,000 is quite a long time for the robot to have been gone. So I would say between 5 and 10,000 at max. And in that time, so like 1,000 years should be more than enough time for him to survey a planet.
Well, a universe.
Yeah. Well, he didn't survey the entire universe. He went and he did select pockets. Also, even if we're going by a sci-fi standard of like
He selected
how often it'd be
pockets
life,
with the most stuff going on.
there, and as far as like if we're going by theoretical stuff, which I don't really subscribe to all of that, but how many planets would support life?
Don't know.
There, not many. So if he's only going to the ones that supported life, there
Okay,
wouldn't be
so-
that many destinations.
Another section.
So,
Presumably it's
Leo,
in-
could you please repeat
it
that?
is.
You cut out, or I might
I'm
have
sorry.
lagged for a moment.
Hold on. You're limited by what kind of galaxy Solus Magna sits in.
Well, we know what shape it is, so what
the-
type of galaxy is?
The galaxy?
Yeah, don't we?
I don't think it's.
Oh no, sorry, I'm thinking of the solar system.
Well,
Only
yeah, that's just
The
the
system is different.
I was thinking because didn't we find a galaxy that looks like Solus Magna, or is that also a system that we?
That was a
looking at?
nebula.
Okay, that was a nebula. Okay.
So you get
yeah, it could be like the,
size.
the
Okay.
makeup of the Solus Magna contained galaxy. Does
So
allow for the rope to sufficiently escape it into other galaxies. Like the
we
Milky Way.
roughly estimate the Milky Way to be about 87,000 light years, give or take, across. That is a prohibitively large distance for most transport without the use of, space bending technology like wormholes and the such.
Yeah, that's delving into that's a whole other thing. So let's just assume that it doesn't take. It's sci-fi logic here, not long to get from planet to planet.
Okay, and then we assume we also have enough inertial dampeners, like in Star Trek, so that no one inside the robot dies every time he decelerates.
Well, wouldn't that be kind of interesting? Like the universe just restarts every time he decelerates.
That'd be like every time you get up from a chair, your immune system just destroys itself.
I feel like that's a medical condition.
It's like
Yeah.
if you get up, you will get AIDS.
You take off in a plane, and suddenly your body attacks itself.
You'd think an Earth-sized robot would have horrific gravitational consequences on any planet he visited.
It
Was
would.
another point I was going to bring up.
But again, we're going by sci-fi rules here.
Yes, the people inside of him can control gravity. He can control his own gravity too. We saw him do it to the moon. He can control his own gravity so that he doesn't destroy anything else's gravity.
Shouldn't the Death Star just like destroy a planet's ecosystem?
Yeah.
I mean,
Depending
it
on
can
where it
also
goes.
destroy a planet.
Yeah, but it doesn't really have to the lasers. They can just like
So-
hover around it for a while.
Yeah. Also,
Yeah.
the Death Star would have to maintain
Seems-
like a a rotation to keep its own gravity inside.
Not it doesn't. It wouldn't need that to keep us.
The Death Star doesn't have central gravity though.
It's probably massive enough,
Maybe.
honestly, that it could.
Anyway, Star Wars is not our topic.
No.
Should we
So,
move
yeah,
on to another topic?
We've only got 9 minutes left. So do we want to start another one, or do we want to finish fleshing out our better timeline? If someone has a quick one, we can go to that. Does anyone have one they think will be a lot quicker discussion?
I
have
was
a-
just gonna say that
Go
the
for it.
story should have ended at Journey's End. I think we talked about this a little bit before.
Okay, yeah, but I think that goes
Um,
against the rules that we have for this
But
topic.
I think the one thing was making the Red Star a thing.
Florida,
Just making
Unpack that.
I like the idea of the Red Star like shining when there are times of trouble or when it's, when things need to get done. But I don't like that he made it like a part of the robot. I would have liked it if it was just like a separate satellite or something like that. And then
Unrelated
also
from the robot.
yeah, and it really stems from that one part in the Gallinuva blog where she looks in the telescope on the beach and suddenly she sees a bunch of people in there. I hate that. I just don't like it. You could take that out and it wouldn't change anything.
It being a zombie factory is kind of weird.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think
this
it's pretty fun.
if already say it wouldn't change anything, and I agree up to a certain point, but here's
so,
where
like,
it gets a little
you
dicey.
Take that out, you
take that out,
the
and then
history
you
of powers,
have
you take out the powers that be, changes nothing.
no.
Well-
But that's the things you can't take out any stories for this.
Wait.
Every
You
story.
also-
Understanding.
You also changed
Yeah.
the reason why the Red Star would strike the Bionicle with lightning.
So yeah, for it, part of the rules here is it can't change any major beats in the story, meaning
But
every-
I said that the Red Star, it can still do.
yeah. But you just
things.
mentioned taking out entire stories from the overall story. You can't do that.
Okay.
So that's where it draws the line. You can change anything as long as the plot narrative of each story can still go through. Just like with minor
Okay.
details changed. Does that make sense?
Okay, I misunderstood the prompt for my specific grievance.
No worries. I mean, I agree that like if something you got there that was a good point. The Red Star shouldn't be a jetpack. I think a satellite is much better.
Yeah, if it were just like a satellite to just kind of monitor the Solus Magnus system to make sure it's not gonna like die out before the robot comes back, that would have been cool.
Hmm.
But
Also,
I think making it a part of the robot, I think it was just a bit too much.
yeah. Also, how does the jetpack thing even work?
Yeah,
It's
it's
too.
like tiny.
Yeah, it's too small.
It's a 40 million foot tall robot. How big is this jetpack going to be? How much of an impact is it going to have to get this thing, this 40 million foot tall behemoth, off a planet?
Leo, you're an astrophysicist, right?
I
How?
took a class.
What is the difference between here and the moon?
That can I understand this correctly? Since there's no resistance in space, it shouldn't take a lot of thrust to propel even a large object, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
So he doesn't
doesn't
really need
need
a jetpack.
But that's only if you want to like that. That's the difference between like, cruising 7 miles an hour, letting your clutch or letting your automatic car just move you along, the automatic transmission move you versus putting on the accelerator and putting on a bunch of gas in and moving.
Would a difference in gravity affect this?
Explain.
So, what if, say, for example, Bara Magna has a higher gravity than other planets, than Earth, for example? Like, what if it's like 4 times gravity?
So
I
all
think it should
all
be at least.
gravitational force falls off by 1 over your distance away from the source squared.
But would it affect the
it
the escape
affects-
velocity, basically?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
If you equate like a centripetal force to your gravitational force drawn by the planet, you can get a value for the escape velocity based on how large the planet is.
But here's the interesting thing about that. The red star doesn't even help with the escape.
Yeah.
It doesn't take
Well-
effect until after you leave the atmosphere.
Which I
Keep in
think,
mind,
which
Oh,
makes
that's
more sense,
right.
in
The
my
robot
opinion.
can control gravity.
So it helps him
Could it
get
not
off.
control itself
Oh!
and float off the planet?
That's right. Yeah, he has gravitic power.
So he can just get off. Then he would hook up to the red star,
He could,
and the red star would be what helps him travel interplanetary or
Yeah,
interstellar.
but if he could just float, using his gravity powers, why does he need it?
Because you
he
don't.
floats up and then it propels.
You'd want a source of power that is auxiliary to yourself, like how there's some rockets that you don't want to have all your fuel taken up with you, because that's just more mass. You have to get up away from the gravity source that you're in. You want to put as much mass as possible in orbit around where it's easier to get to versus going through all the work to get it off the ground every time.
Oh.
That is one possibility of a new space station plus a base on the moon, which would be used to refuel rockets
Okay.
and service them.
This is just getting to general physics questions now, but wouldn't we still have to propel the fuel up there to begin with?
Yes, but it's easier to stay up there once you have it. I'm actually reading funny enough, I'm reading an Arthur C. Clarke novel right now where the rocket scientists. This was written in 1951, so like some 19 or 18 years before the Apollo missions, or at least before we landed on the moon. And their rocket is 2 stages. One stage is just this big, massive cluster of rockets that's supposed to push a bunch of fuel tanks into the atmosphere in orbit around the Earth, and then it'll push the regular rocket stage, which will then collect the satellite fuel tanks that were pushed in orbit beforehand, and then it'll jet itself to the moon and back.
Follow-up question. If we put a moon base up there, where's the most aesthetic place to put it?
Well, probably one of the Lagrange points that exists between the Earth and the moon and the sun.
So is that the light or the dark side of the moon?
I don't remember where our Lagrange points are.
What's a Lagrange point?
It is so it comes as a solution to the two-body problem using Newton's equations. It is a place where you can stick another spot and have another body and have a semi-stable orbit between 2 other bodies that exist in
We
close
should do a
proximity.
So wait, are we not talking the surface of the moon then?
Oh.
No, we are not.
Okay,
This is this is an orbit.
Oh.
Okay, so this is
I thought that's what you were talking about
okay.
when you said aesthetic place.
No, I was talking about because the moon looks really nice in pictures and stuff. So if we stick something on it, we want it to be in a place that won't be take away from the nice looks.
Well, okay. Well, that's also something also to consider is the moon receives a whole bunch of unfiltered solar radiation. The dark side of the moon would be able to mitigate from all that, but you also wouldn't really be able to power anything.
We should just do a bonus podcast where we probe Leo for space questions.
Oh gosh! Please just
That's
ask me about dust.
Look. That's
I don't care
great.
about
It's gonna
dust. I
get
want
me-
to know where we'd put the base on the moon.
I don't know. I'll talk to my professor. He's on the committees for it.
I got up a little map of the moon here. I don't know if it's accurate. We'd have to paint it gray so it blends in.
Oh yeah, so the aliens don't see it. Okay.
No, we don't want to take away from the way the moon looks.
True. It does look like cheese sometimes.
So maybe if you just put it in a crater. How big are these craters, anyways?
I'm not entirely sure. It depends. They vary.
Mace, you know this, right?
I do not know.
You're a resident moon expert.
I have Google.
Okay. Leo and Ford don't know how to Google anymore. They're in graduate school.
Look, the moon is so lunar energy. I am a very solar energy person.
Shut up, Ford.
Solar energy people do not use Google. All right.
I'm not even
So
following
they
at
can
this
be
point.
200 to 550 kilometers wide.
I don't know what kilometers are, but Leo, does that sound like enough space?
1,600 miles.
That
or
seems like enough.
2,500 kilometers.
That sounds like enough space to me.
The South Pole
How many football
and
fields
basin.
is that?
is the largest impact crater on the far side of the moon.
We don't want. No, you can't take the large ones. Those are like national park territory.
I understand.
Wait, is that the crater that the Ark landed in that Transformers movie?
I don't know.
No, that was on the dark side of the moon.
Oh right. All right.
It's literally in the title, Dark of the Moon.
Oh yeah.
So you gotta take one of the smaller craters.
One of the 200s. Not
See,
the
Leo,
five.
what I'm getting from this is science isn't asking the important questions.
Or you're asking someone who doesn't know the answers to some of these important questions.
But you're the science, right?
I'm not. No, I am not Dr. Fauci.
Yeah,
I
I
am
cannot
not
claim-
science.
Neither of us claims to be the vicar of science. All right.
Well, you're letting people who aren't qualified claim that title. So maybe you
my
should
fault.
just go ahead and claim it.
Biology is just going to eat itself.
All
In a
right.
way, yes.
We are running out of time, though, so Mace and Kevin will have to get to your points on the next episode if you prepared them. Let's give a tease, though, Mace, so we can think about this. Mace, what was your point going to be? No discussing it, but what was the point going to be?
I was going to say that the great beings should have retained a level of mysticism and not been completely demystified.
Oh, the mysticism thing can be stretched an entire episode in itself, so yeah, good thing we didn't go to that. Kevin.
I think I misunderstood the prompt a bit, so I'll have to get back to you on
Okay,
another episode.
Tell us what you got then so we can make fun of you.
Oh, I was saying resurrecting certain beings, but not Mataro on the Red Star, kind of sucked.
Okay, yeah,
That
you
wasn't
misunderstood it a
completely-
little bit. I mean, I try not to criticize that plotline as such because we don't know where it was ever going to go.
No,
True.
but at the same time, I feel like it took away from a lot of sacrifices, but that was me.
You could say
No.
if it was in the case of Motoro, that would really be honing in on the Jesus. Christ
Technically,
figure.
that's also I think, yeah.
Jala, where's Motoro? He is risen.
That's why we weren't going to do the Bionicle Theology podcast tonight, because we need to get people on the right track before we
Wait,
start.
wait. Who would the Romans be in this situation?
No, this
The
is the-
Baraka. and the Baraki.
Ugh.
Oh man.
I think the Brachii would be like the Levites. All right, no, that's gonna do it for us today. We will get back to this in another part whenever we feel we're good and ready for it.
And if we don't come back, you will know why.
Yeah. I do look forward to. I'm gonna keep teasing the Bionicle and Theology podcast until we actually get around to that. But that's one that we've got to actually have everything in line for. It's gonna be chaos. You know, if you're gonna go out and fight the Calvinists and the Arminians, you've got to be ready. So, but be sure to leave a comment on what you think of all of our tweaks to Bionicle. If you think they're good points to change, if you think there's reasons they should stay like that in the story, if you're a complete apologist, or if you just hate Bionicle, I'd like to hear what you have to say. All right, and join us every Monday night at 9:15 Eastern Standard Time, give and take how late we are that day. Join the BCC Crew Discord server, the link is in the description below. Also, all that good stuff like Twitter and Rumble and stuff that I have been forgetting to update lately, it is there, so you can attempt to go there as well. So, for Ford, Leo, Mace, and Laris, myself, LQ, we thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.
how the Leo no points just flash.
Yeah.